Welcome everyone to this meeting of the Audit Committee. We're making full use of the video conferencing facilities due to the weather. We've got a fairly full meeting planned. So I'll ask first, we've got minutes to approve. Does anyone have any comments on the minutes? And hearing none, could I have a motion to approve the minutes of the last meeting of the Audit Committee?
I'll move.
Thank you, Beryl. Paul?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. Okay. Kathy, I'm going to turn this over to you now.
Okay, thanks, John. Before George starts, I thought I'd give him a little bit of an introduction. We advertised to procure for the services of an independent firm to undertake an external quality assessment of DASNY's internal audit department in accordance with the IA standards, as well as the New York State Internal Control Act. An external review is required once every 5 years. So as a result of this procurement, G. Shimo Consulting, Inc. was selected to perform these services. Mr. Shimo has extensive experience and insight in internal auditing and has performed over 100 of these reviews, which include many other New York State entities. He's a New York State licensed CPA, and he is the former director of internal audit for the New York State OSC. He held that position for 20 years prior to his retirement. So now I'll turn it over to George to summarize the results of his review.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. And I'm sorry I wasn't able to get to the video conferencing site because of the weather. So I'm going to do this by phone. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Number one, Kathy. At this point, by the way, I've done probably about 250 of these reviews. That sounds like one of my old bios that you're reading from. So, yeah, we've done quite a few of these at this point in time. So what I want to do is I'm going to spend just a couple of minutes going through the report and to present it. And I really would like to just open it up to questions. And I also understand if you have a hard stop at 6, you don't want to be spending a whole lot of time on this. Now, I also to point out that this is the second...
George, can you...
Yes.
George, can you hold on for a second?
Yes, Kat.
Kim, there's a lot of feedback. Do you know, is there any way that we can try to fix that?
Too close to the... How's this?
No, it's like an echo.
It's like an echo.
Yeah, so
Okay.
the three-way is going to pick it up a little.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
All right, I'm moving away from the microphone a little bit. Can you still hear me?
We can hear you.
Yes.
Okay.
Like Luke Garrett.
I wanted to point out that this is the second review that I have conducted of the Internal Audit Department at DASNY. The first review was done, I think, back in 2014, and of course, every 5 years we do the review. In 2019 is the next review. I want to tell you that this review resulted in an entirely different, I think, result in internal audit at DASNY as it existed 5 years ago, as it exists now. The IIA, the Institute of Internal Auditors, is an organization that regulates internal auditing, provides the standards, and also provides the guidance on doing these reviews. And one of the things that the IIA does have is what's called a maturity model for internal auditing. It goes from a beginning shop through emerging shop to an established shop to an advanced organization and then into a leading practitioner situation. When I first started this 5 years ago, internal audit was definitely at the beginning stage. I can tell you right now that I think Kathy has brought this internal audit department into level 4, which is what we call an age of internal auditing. And I think that in and of itself is highly commendable because Kathy had some significant challenges along the way. And one of the things that we'll talk about in the report was something that last time we pointed on to, we had efficiency of the audit. That situation has been rectified to a point where the efficiency of the audit staff is now at this point. And Kathy has been able to leverage that and bring this internal audit into the next level.
John, hold on, George, one sec. John, I think, can you try muting, see what happens?
I did. I muted my mic, but I am noticing that the screen keeps registering the Albany boardroom. So I think some of the echo may be coming from Albany. If you guys can mute your mics in Albany, that may cut it down. I think we should all just mute, to the extent that we can, and that may cut it down. I'm going to mute again.
Are we on mute?
Okay, let me know when you want me to start up again.
George,
Yes,
are you
Kate.
on a speaker? Are you using a speakerphone?
Well, yes, I'm using a microphone from, which is a camera microphone.
You're using their computer?
Yes, I am.
Could you try calling in on a line then? If when we mute, if we're still having this, we'll just have you calling.
I can do that. That'd be fine.
Okay. Let's just try and see if the muting works though.
Okay, have we muted it in Albany? I guess we're ready to go then? Okay, so what I was talking about was the maturity model that the IA has, and I think Kathy has done an excellent job of bringing this internal audit department up to the 4th level, which is the advanced level, which usually takes somewhere around 10 years to accomplish, and Kathy seems to have been able to do that in a 5-year period. So with that little introduction, I want to get to the report itself. These EQAs, okay, hello? Can you hear me? Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
we
Okay,
can.
I just got a message that the recording had stopped. I just heard that in my headset here.
Yep, it resumed.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about the report itself. The overall opinion on conformance is that Kathy's internal audit department at DASNY generally conforms to the standards, and that is the key of the evaluation, and it is the highest level of opinion she can receive. The other part of that is we also take a look to see if the internal audit department is meeting the expectations of management and the audit committee. I have found that she does do that. And then we also take a look and see if there are any recommendations we can make to enhance the internal audit function within the organization, within DASNY. And I think we do have a few recommendations on that, and we'll go through those in just a minute. Just to compare this time to 5 years ago, I believe we had 8 standards were evaluated as being performance. Those are the individual standards themselves. The last time we also concluded overall that we had a situation of general conformance as we do this time. However, this time we only had 1 standard that was rated as being partial conformance, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we get into the report. Okay, but I think that in and of itself is a tremendous achievement by the internal audit department under Kathy's leadership. I'm not going to go through the scope and methodology. I think it's pretty straightforward. Obviously, the interviewing was a big part of what I did in terms of following the quality assessment formula of the Institute of Internal Auditors. And at this point, I also want to thank everyone for the cooperation with the process. It was outstanding. No one tried to duck an interview. Everyone was forthcoming with their points of view, and it was extremely helpful in coming to a conclusion and putting this report together. So I do want to thank everyone at DASNY for that. In terms of recommendations, I only have the 1 recommendation for conformance, and that deals with Kathy's looking at the governance processes within DASNY. We'll go through that a little bit more. Then I had 5 recommendations for enhancement, and I'll briefly go through those. One of them you may have some questions on a little bit, and I'll try to focus on that one a little bit more. We also have, I'm on page 6 of the report at this point, a number of commendable actions that have taken place and things that I thought Kathy should be commended for, and you can take a look at those on page 6. Moving on to the recommendations, the one for improvement deals with Kathy's review of DASNY governance processes. And it's not that Kathy is not reviewing governance or considering it. I think what happens, though, is that she identifies it as something she needs to review. She's identified IT governance as an important element. Also, the ethics process within DASNY. Those are two of the very important governance processes that internal audit is required to look at. One of the things that happens, though, is that when we go through the rating process in terms of risk priorities and what do we put on the annual plan in the current year, these elements come in, I guess, at a lower level from a risk standpoint. So they don't pop up onto the schedule of areas to be audited. That is probably not the way it needs to be done. What needs to be done is the governance processes themselves need to be specifically identified, and then over the, I think the audit cycle, which is a 5-year cycle that Kathy and the audit committee has created, that these governance areas need to be reviewed over that 5-year cycle at least once during that 5-year cycle. So I think what we need to do is not really look at risk of these processes, but look at them in terms of required processes that have to be on the agenda over that 5-year period. Okay, I think you can ask more questions on that, but why don't you let me go on, and we'll talk more now about the enhancements to the organization of internal auditing. Okay, and the first one concerned Kathy's interaction with senior management, which is excellent. So I don't want this to be construed as a negative, but there seems to be other ways that Kathy maybe could be recognized more as an actual member, okay, of executive staff. Because I think because of not being a member of executive staff, there were certain meetings that Kathy did not go to, although she certainly attends a lot of meetings at the executive staff level. And the other thing was I think that maybe, and I know you're in the process of waiting for a new CEO, but when that CEO comes in place, it probably would be a very good idea for Kathy to meet one-on-one with the CEO on some regular basis, whether that be monthly or quarterly or something to that degree, okay? And the whole concept here is to help the information flow to the audit executive, to Kathy, so that she has a better understanding of issues that DASNY faces as they develop, okay? Or maybe answer questions, okay, as questions arise. I think at this point in time, there are points sometimes Kathy kind of reacts to situations after she learns about them. And that's probably not exactly what the ideal situation that we want to see. Also, I think including Kathy as a member of executive staff and making sure that she interacts with the CEO and attends all the meetings is the perception of the rest of the organization of internal audit and the importance that management and the audit committee places on internal audit as part of the fabric of managing the operation. Okay, I think that would also be a big help to that. That's the first recommendation. I move on to page 9, and we talk about the second recommendation, and this is specifically for the audit committee. I think it would be really a great idea during executive sessions, or at least one of the executive sessions of an audit committee meeting, is to have Kathy be the sole attendee. This is a fairly standard practice for audit committees to meet solely with the chief audit executive, with nobody else in attendance. That would be the first thing I would recommend. I think also the audit committee could be involved in formally evaluating Kathy's performance, and probably add that responsibility to the audit committee charter. It's not in a charter right now. Also be involved in approving the annual compensation package for Kathy. That's also one of the standard things, and I think it's actually in the audit committee charter. but I did not see that being done within the audit committee meeting minutes, okay? And that's another point also. It would be a great idea. Sometimes you document, other times you don't, but when you do execute your relationship with internal audit, it's probably a good idea to document that in your minutes. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. For instance, we approve the annual plan, okay? That was, I think, the prior year that was in the minutes. This current year, it was not, okay? So documenting the activity of the audit committee in executing its role with internal audit it would be a good idea. Also, approving the internal audit department annual budget and resourcing plan, which would be basically staffing, okay? And probably also external contracting dollars, okay, would be part of the resourcing plan. Okay, that is the second one. The third one for enhancement is on page 10. Can everybody still hear me? Everybody's on mute. Okay. All right. The next one is ensuring the independence over the work that is outside the role of internal audit. And I think this is the one that may cause some questions. And I just want to try to introduce the concept a little bit. Internal audit is encouraged to do only internal auditing type work within the role of internal auditing, and that is defined in the standards. It doesn't preclude internal audit to be assigned other activities, however, and that's okay. And one of the things that I did see in taking a look at the work that Kathy does is she does a lot of construction-related work, okay? And that is fine for internal audit to do that kind of work. It certainly is a role of an internal audit function to do that. But the way Kathy is doing it, she's doing it as what we would call the second line of defense. And the second line of defense occurs because there does not seem to be anyone within the construction division, okay, that actually goes out and does reviews of contracts and reviews of project managers and how they're performing. Okay, and quite frankly, in organizations that have construction units, they usually have a group that goes out and does review work like this. And that is something that we would call the second line of defense because it's contained within the management structure. Okay, and then the internal audit department would be the third line of defense. They would audit that process. They too would go out and audit contracts and contractors and project managers, but do it more as validating the second line of defense work. So right now, Kathy seems to be the only one doing the work, so de facto she becomes the second line of defense, and therefore that kind of work now is outside of the normal role of internal audit. And when you do that, there's a few things that have to take place, okay? And I think the way you handle this is Kathy should acknowledge in her internal audit charter that she does work outside the role of internal audit, identify the kind of work, and when she does an engagement like this, she should probably inform the audit committee that she's doing it. In the annual plan, these kinds of audits should be identified as being outside the scope of auditing, internal auditing. And then also, because she's the second line of defense, someone should evaluate the work that Kathy does, the internal audit department does, in terms of audit oversight. So if it comes up on the annual plan, Kathy's oversight of construction, a third party would have to come in and actually evaluate her work in order for it to be completely independent, okay? And that's what this talks about. So I'm talking about this one a little more in detail because my sense is you may have some questions on this. Going on to the fourth and the fifth ones on page 11, I think and this is an issue that most internal audit departments face, and that is to have enough IT capability resident within the staff itself. At the current time, I think we don't really have that type of IT auditor on staff. We're not talking about someone who can audit technology, but someone who understands the implications of technology and how internal audit should look at it and what kind of impact it has on the other audit engagements we do where we use IT, and how do we audit that area in relation to the application that it uses, okay? So that's what this fourth, enhancing the IT proficiency of the internal audit department staff. I think hiring someone with an IT background would be excellent. Also provide additional training to the existing staff probably would be a a good idea. And then the fifth one, okay, is kind of a mechanical thing. The current annual planning process and risk assessment process has identified cutoffs for what is high risk and medium risk and low risk, and that's been applied to the internal audit IT audit universe. And I'm not sure that those parameters are equal. And I think what I'm seeing is that there are some areas of IT that probably should pop up on the audit universe and on the audit plan, and right now they are not. So I think what I'm recommending for Kathy to do is take a separate look at IT and the IT risk and develop her annual plan a little differently for IT and include more IT engagements, okay, in the annual planning process. All right, so that is my summary of the report. And at this point, I'm going to open it up for questions. And I guess we have to unmute our mics.
George, I'm going to suggest that we go into executive session in order to discuss the financial and credit history of particular corporations, proposed, pending, or current litigation, and the employment history of particular persons or matters leading to the appointment, employment, promotion, demotion, discipline, suspension, dismissal, or removal of particular persons. Could I have a motion to go into executive session? Thank you. Kim, we are in executive session. Okay, I'd like to note that we have just concluded an executive session and that no action was taken in executive session other than to return to the public session. Kim, can we get an update on the audit procurement process? Your mic is muted, Kim.
Thank you, John. The committee is continuing its work. I do not have a recommendation to bring before the audit committee this evening.
Okay, thank you. Kathy, can you report on the status of the internal audit plan?
Yes, thank you. If everyone can turn to the internal audit report. This report provides you with our standard update. I'd like to highlight the progress being made as well as to propose a revised audit plan. The revised plan is due to a reassessment of risk as well as resource needs. So at this time, I'd like to request a approval to the revisions of the plan. John?
Can I get a motion to approve the revised plan?
I would
Earl?
like to approve the revised plan.
Can I get a second?
You're the second,
You have the
John.
second. You're second.
I'm the second, okay. All in favor, aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Is there any further business to come before this committee? Hearing none, can I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Bill. I'll second the motion, and we are adjourned.
Thank you.